Good morning. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention something to everybody that's here, because you guys are usually the core group, that the Brotherhood is going to restart our Monday morning minions. But we want to invite all men and women from the temple to participate. So Ed Schwartz and I are going to chair it, but we want to get 8 more people on our committee from the rest of the temple. And a couple what? Okay. Well, for the committee, and then to open it up to the entire temple to join us, because what we... Well, bless you. Okay, first of all, if you contact Ed, myself, or Janice Beisman, and if you'd like to be on the committee, we're going to be developing this starting, we want to start in August, but we'd like to get a core group to meet so we can have it organized. So it's not just developed by the Brotherhood, but it's all the men and women of the singers. So if you can if you're interested today, get with me and I'll email you when we're going to meet. And then what we'd like to do is, as we get our minion going again, we'd like to invite other people that have never been to a weekday chakra service and have it as an area of instruction. So after the service or before the service, we can go over what's involved with the people that have never been to a weekday chakra. And this is going to be lay leadership. The rabbis and cantors are not going to be involved because they have enough on their plate. But so go ahead and let me know after today, the service, or after the class. If you're interested, I'd like to put you on the committee, and Ed and I will then start, let you know. Okay, definitely. Thank you very much.
In a moment, we're going to be in a Torah portion of Naso, chapter 7, Numbers chapter 7, if you want to get it ready. Okay, good to see you. Here we go. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Beini uven v'nei Yisrael oti le'olam, oti le'olam. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai es hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi shavat v'nafash, shavat v'nafash, shavat v'nafash. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hagafen. Amen. L'chaim.
Summer wine.
Okay. The blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, so last week there we did Shavuot, if you remember. We talked about Ruth, so we're back to the traditional cycle of Torah. Torah portion of Naso. Third triennial cycle brings us to chapter 7, verse 1, which you could argue, by the way, Naso is the longest Torah portion in the Torah, a lot of verses, and you could argue that chapter 7 that we're going to deal with today, it's 89 verses. That's a lot for a chapter. And you could argue it's one of the most boring chapters in the entire Torah. It's not at all interesting. It repeats the same thing 12 times with each tribe. And in some places, certain study groups could be in a lot of trouble if this is the only chapter if this is the only chapter they had to deal with, if they were limited to the third triennial cycle, it could be a real problem. It could be a real problem. Fortunately, this isn't one of those places. And I think we're going to manage just fine. Because there's a lesson embedded in chapter 7 that is more important today than ever. And if you've been following the Jewish world in any respect for the last 20 years, and especially even more based on what's going on in Israel, then I think you find the message that is here is more germane today than it's been in a long time. Well, how do I want to say this? I don't want to give it away. All right, so let's get into it soon. Yes, Bob?
Wednesday night's Torah class, the class ended before I got to ask the question that I wanted to ask. I'm going to ask it now in the beginning so I don't run out of time. But when we do the counting of men 30 to 50 by tribe, I thought that the basic military was 20 to 50 and not 30 to 50. And I didn't understand. Am I wrong understanding that, or is that?
I don't know, where does it say 20?
I thought another portion of the Torah would be.
Oh, maybe it does. I have to be honest, I'm not sure. Okay. I'll have to look it up. It might. I don't recall that. Although they do talk about it earlier, but I'd have to double check. It would be interesting if there's a distinction. It would be interesting, but I don't recall hearing about it. But I'll look it up. That's an interesting question. If there is a distinction, if it says 20 in one place and 30 in another, then I'm sure the Talmud will have the answer, because the Talmud loves to find those distinctions. But I haven't come across it. But it sounds like something fun to learn. I'll try to look it up. Okay, so chapter 7, let's get into it. Now, by the way, why I say this is so boring, and we're not going to read all 89 verses, but basically you're going to have the offerings of each of the tribes, and they each do the same offering, and it's repeated the exact same way. So when it says this tribe offered this, this, and this tribe offered this, this, and this, it could have just said all these tribes offered this, this, and this, and we would have learned the same thing. So obviously there's a reason why it's drawn out 89 verses. And so let me just point out, just for your own Torah knowledge, whenever you get one of these types of chapters, where it just repeats the same thing over and over again, whether it's a whether it's a genealogy or something like this, or we're counting the numbers of the tribes, what should you look for? There's usually a few verses at the beginning, at the end, that are like an introduction and a conclusion. And there are usually clues there about what's going on. The other thing you could do is what Bob did. They say, well, what's different? What are, and then the other thing you could do is you could look at each of the tribes and say, well, is any of the other tribes, is there anything different? Now, this one, they're all the same, so you're not going to find anything there. But you will find something in the introduction, which is what I want to look at now. So if we begin with chapter 7, verse 1, Norman, let's see what we can find.
On the day that Moses finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed and consecrated it and all its furnishings, as well as the altar and its utensils. When he had anointed and consecrated them, the chieftains of Israel, the heads of ancestral houses, namely the chieftains of the tribes, those who were in charge of enrollment, drew near and brought their offering before the Eternal. 6 draft carts.
Okay, so let's just, the first 2 verses, who's in charge? Who are the main players? Besides Moses, who finishes the tabernacle, so Moses finishes the tabernacle, and then we're going to have some sort of ceremony. Who are the people involved? Chieftains. So a good question then would be, what's a chieftain? Now, the Hebrew is the Nasi'im, or in Hebrew, or in singular, Nasi, which in modern Hebrew means president. Beit HaNasi, Herzog's house. He lives there now, on Jabotinsky Street in Jerusalem. Beit HaNasi. Nasi, but here it can also mean prince. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was the editor of the Mishnah. He was called Rabbi Judah the Prince. So it can sometimes mean prince. Here it means chieftain, but really the head of the tribe. So a good question is, does anyone remember an election? How did you get to be the head of the tribe? There was no election. Who decided how? Okay, so look at Rashi on 7:2, first one on the page. These are the leaders of the tribes. They were the officers appointed over them in Egypt. And they were beaten. Remember this? We talked about it. They were beaten on account of them. As it says, the officers of the children of Israel were beaten. The Midrash tells us, which means to say, when the Jews didn't get enough bricks made, and they were supposed to whip them to get the Jews to make more bricks faster, they refused to do it. So then when the Egyptian overseers came and there weren't enough bricks, they took the beatings so that the people didn't have, they refused to beat their people so that they didn't have to. Clear? Okay. Okay, so that's how you became a Nasi. You had to have taken some beatings on behalf of the other people. So those are the people who we can say so far are the stars of the show for chapter 7. Okay, verse 3.
Well, they drew near and brought their offering before the Eternal, 6 draft carts and 12 oxen, a cart for every 2 chieftains, and an ox for each one. When they had brought them before the tabernacle, the Eternal One said to Moses, "Accept these from them for use in the service of the tent of meeting, and give them to the Levites according to their respective services." Moses took the carts and the oxen and gave them to the Levites.
Okay, so still, this is boring, right? I mean, who cares? But there's clues here. You can't ignore the clues. So how many chieftains are there? 12. Good. How do you know that? Because there are 12 tribes. Technically, there's 13. Because Joseph splits into Ephraim and Manasseh, right? But for this case, there's 12. Okay, which means that they were united. Ephraim and Manasseh were united for this. But if you look in verse 3, they brought their offerings before God, 6 covered wagons and 12 oxen. So how many oxen per tribe? 2. No, look, and 12 oxen. So, but how many oxen are there per tribe? 1. How many carts are there per tribe? Half. Good. Some of you are math majors, right? Some of you are able to do that kind of thing in your head. Right. So here's what I'm pointing out. Part of this, well, before I even say it, let's look at what Nachmanides says. If you look at the second source on the sheet, if you're watching at home, by the way, the sheets are where they always are, tbam.org/worksheet. Edith, would you mind reading? This is Nachmanides on number 7.3.
Now, all the princes brought this offering on the same day because they all agreed to it simultaneously. But since it was impossible that one of them should not precede the others, he honored those who came first in the position of the standards to bring their offerings on the earlier days. He wanted, however, to mention them all by name and the details of their offerings, and to cite the day of each one, rather than honoring the first one by saying, "This was the offering of Nachshon, the son of Amminadab," and then saying, "And so did each of the princes offer on his day." For that would have been a diminution of the honor of the others.
Okay, so, we didn't need that Nachmanides yet, so I want to make 2 points. First point that Nachmanides makes is, as we go through, each day, a different tribe is going to bring their offering. But they're not going to offer it. They're just going to bring it. So the first tribe comes and brings their oxen and gives the oxen to Moses, says, on behalf of our tribe, here's, Morris. Or whatever we named him. Next tribe comes up, oxen. Here's Sparky. Right, here's Murray, here's Sparky, here's whatever. Okay, 12. At the end, when everything was offered, they brought the oxen and slaughtered them all together. Why? Because it's physically impossible. They couldn't all bring them at the same time. They had to take turns bringing them because of the way they were encamped. But they didn't want to say that one tribe was better than the other. And for all of history, the first tribe would say they offered our offering first to the tabernacle, we're the best, and so forth. They didn't want that. So they're trying to have some sort of equality between the tribes. Okay? Now, that being said, they also want to keep the individual nature of each tribe. So what happened is, what was the order? You might think it was Reuben, Simon, Levi, Judah, in order of how they were born. It wasn't. It was based on how they marched out. When the book of Numbers starts, they each have their flag and how they started, the order that they were in, and they marched 3 at a time, 3, 3, 3, 3, and it was based on how they encamped around the tabernacle. Okay, so now that they're marching out and they start going, they each have their own flag, different colors and different designs. It's in the first portion of Numbers. And where do those designs come from? We're going to get to that at the end. I don't want to give that away. But they each have their own design, kind of like the states of America, right? We each have our own flag. Okay. They have corn, and we have, anti-wokeism, and they have, truth hurts.
Rather not get into a picture.
All right. But every state has its own Meshuggah, whatever. Okay, so if every state has its own, or every tribe has its own design, you could get the sense that there are 12 different nations. And if everyone brought their own oxen, you could get the sense that there are 12 different nations. So, in order not to do that, come back to verse 3. In order that you shouldn't think that, 6 covered wagons and 12 oxen, a wagon for each 2 princes. No prince walked alone. Every prince was linked to another tribe. You see that? In order that they should remember that their tribe isn't by itself, that you're with the group. That's a huge point. It's an amazing point. I don't know how many Muslim nations there are in the world. Dozens? Whatever. And one Jewish one. Now, could you imagine if there were lots of Jewish ones?
What a fight.
I mean, look, we argue about everything. But, think about all the fighting they do amongst each other. The Iran-Iraq war, the tension between Iran and Saudi Arabia right now, the proxy wars in Yemen and stuff. Between Jews, that would never happen. I mean,
What's happening now?
we would argue, but I mean, look at the demonstrations that are going on in Israel. What other nation could have demonstrations every Saturday night in the hundreds of thousands of people? Not one window has been broken. Not one ball of falafel has been stolen. I went to one of them. It is perfectly peaceful. There's nothing to worry about. What other country, including ours, could hundreds of thousands of people rally against the government and have virtually no animosity or violence? I mean, there are a couple of people who got pushed here and there, but very few. It's really remarkable. Now, I mean, do we always get along? Of course not. We don't even recognize each other as Jews sometimes. But there has always been this notion that we need to stick together. And it's become easier since the second temple's been destroyed because we're all pretty much the same, not even since the first temple's been destroyed. Even before that, 723 was when the 10 tribes of the north were conquered by Assyria. So for 46 years, 23 on both sides, we've all pretty much been one tribe because the 10 tribes were lost to Assyria, never to be found again. And the remaining 3 tribes, which were Judah, Levi, and Benjamin, all came into one and were all called Judah, which is why when they all became Judah, we became known as the Jews. So we're all, from the same tribe. We've since stratified Ashkenazic, Sephardic, whatever. Ashkenazic, Sephardic, Aventura, Pinecrest, there's, but the interesting thing here is this is a chapter that's all going to be about each tribe on its own and what they do, but it starts off by saying no chieftain walked alone. That's what I'm pointing out in verse 3. Okay, clear so far? Okay, let's go to verse 4. Erica, would you mind taking us forward? Verse 4? Is that where we got to? Yeah, verse 4.
The Lord said to Moses, "Accept this from them for using the service of the tent of meeting, and give them to the Levites according to their respective services." Moses took the cart and the oxen and gave them to the Levites. 2 carts and 4 oxen he gave to the Gershonites, as requires for their service, and 4 carts and 8 oxen he gave to the Merarites, as required for their service, under the direction of Itamar, son of Aaron the priest.
Right, so Levi was broken up itself into 3 sections based on the 3 sons of Levi and their descendants. There was Gershon, Kohath, and their Italian cousin Merari. Right? Okay. Verse 9.
But to the Kohathites he did not give any, since theirs was the service of the most sacred objects. The porterage was by shoulder. The chieftains also brought the dedication offerings for the altar upon its being anointed. As the chieftains were presenting their offerings before the altar, the Lord said to Moses, Let them present their offerings for the dedication of the altar, one chieftain each day. The one who presented his offering on the first day was Nachshon, son of Aminadab of the tribe of Judah. His offering, 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekel, and 1 silver basin of 70 shekel by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering. 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, 1 bull of herd, 1 ram, 1 lamb in the first year for a burnt offering, 1 goat for a sin offering, and for his sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearlings lamb. That was the offering of Nachshon, son of Aminadab.
Okay. The rabbis don't really talk about how interesting it is that it's Nachshon who goes first. According to the Midrash, he's the one who jumped into the Red Sea first, and that's what caused it to split. He's the one who said, Micha Mocha, and the water got in his mouth. And so now here's the first one jumping in again. I would have thought that the Mefarshim, the commentators on the Torah, would have made a big deal about that. They don't, which is kind of interesting. I would have expected a little more there. I mean, there may be somewhere in the Talmud or the Midrash that's explained, but none of the Rashi, Nachmanides, none of the great commentators bring that up. But it's, why is Judah, probably first in the way that it worked out? Because all the kings are going to come from Judah. But, then there's really no rhyme or reason for, because we have Issachar next. And if I asked you, which tribe would you think? Judah's the king. Who do you think would come after? You might say Joseph, because the leaders, at the end of Genesis are really Joseph and Judah. Or you might say Reuben, because he was first, or Levi. Nobody's first guess. Issachar. Now, Issachar was known for Torah study. In fact, the Hine Matovu Manayim, which in the Psalms, you've heard it before? Behold how good it is that brothers and sisters dwell together. What is it really about? It's about 2 tribes. One of them is Zevulun, and one of them is Issachar. This is explained in the commentary to that verse by a rabbi from the 1800s named the Malbim. And what he explains is that what was so great about the relationship between Zevulun and Issachar. So Issachar, they were the tribes who studied Torah. And they were known for studying Torah. And Zvulun were the hunters and gathered food. And they had a deal between them. Zvulun said, you study Torah on our behalf, and we'll get credit for the mitzvah of study Torah, and we'll provide you with food, and you'll get food. And that way we'll have a partnership, and we'll do what we do best, and you do what you do best, and we'll both get credit for both mitzvahs. And we'll both have food. And they did that. And at some point, someone said, hey, it's nice that brothers get along and do stuff like this. And the way you say, hey, it's nice that brothers get along and do stuff like this is, Hine matovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. And it turned into a nice song. Now, so we sing it all the time, which is ironic because we sing it with our friends. Meanwhile, I wouldn't do a damn thing for this guy. But I'm happy to sit here on Friday mornings and, lean back and forth and sing it, but I'm not going hunting for his food. Right, maybe you are, I don't know. But that was the original intent of the verse. And everyone, each tribe had its own kind of thing. And they were supposed to do it on behalf of all the other tribes. And that way, everything worked out for everybody, sort of like a kibbutz style. And it worked out. Okay, now, we could keep going through this. Let's go through one more so you can see. But I don't think we need to read through all 12 tribes because it's redundant. It's the same thing over and over again. So, Joe, would you let's do one more tribe. Issachar, verse 18.
Right. Verse 18. On the second day, Nethanel, son of Zuar, chieftain of Issachar, made his offering. He presented as his offering 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, 1 goat for a sin offering, and for his sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Nethanel, son of Zuar.
Right. That's actually the name of the canner's son. One of her sons named Nathanael. Which means God has given. Beautiful name. Okay. So let's just look. Shelley, would you mind reading the Rashi on verse 11? I kind of mentioned this, but I just want to point it out, what the Midrash says about how the offerings were brought.
They shall offer their offering, each prince on his day, for the dedicating of the altar. But Moses did not yet know how they were to bring their offerings, whether according to the order of their birth, according to the order in which the sons of Jacob, after whom the tribes were named, were born, in which case the prince of the tribe of Reuben would have offered first, or according to the order in which they moved off of the journeys, when Judah would be first, until he was told by the mouth of the Holy One, blessed be he, according to the order on the journeys shall they offer. Yet each prince on his day, and not 3 together as they actually journeyed.
Okay, so Moses didn't know. Do we go, Reuben first? He's the oldest. And so God says no. The other option is according to how they journey. But they journeyed 3 at a time. They journeyed 3 at a time. So then you might think, okay, well, so I'll have 3 go first, and then the second day, another 3, and so forth. And then he said, no, split them up. 1, 1, 1. So it's a bizarre system. But you'll notice it always says they brought their offerings. It never actually says they slaughtered them. And the Hebrew, vayikarev, means to bring close or to offer. But it never says zevach, which is to slaughter. They never actually did that until the very end. So each day they would bring the oxen, or the ox, and then they would have all 12, and at the end they would offer them. So the rest of the chapter is going to go through now, just like Joe read. We did Judah, we did Issachar, there's 10 more, and it's identical. They brought this many ladles and this many whatever, and that's it. So when it gets to the end, what I'd like to do is skip the next 10, and please trust me that they're all identical, and go now to the end. So verse 78 is the last tribe. And after we read through verse 78, that means we've now read each tribe and what they brought. So obviously, I would hope the question would be, if you were studying this on your own, why did I just have to read each tribe explained they brought this, this, and this? Couldn't you just said, all 12 in this order, brought this, this, and this, done it in 2 or 3 verses instead of 78? Okay, so we found a couple clues in the beginning. One of the clues we found were that there are these princes, and they did something special in Egypt, which was they took mercy on the other Jews and took the beatings on their behalf. Then we saw that they brought the oxen individually, 1 for each tribe, but only 6 wagons, which means to say that there was 1 wagon for every 2 tribes, and no prince walked alone, which you would imagine is a constant reminder that I'm not the only one here, right? Okay, so we learned that so far. Then we also learned that the order had nothing to do with birth, that it had to do with how you were marching, and it's a very random order, although it's not surprising to us that Judah is at the top because they are the kings. How we know that, we're going to find that out in a little bit. I don't want to give it away, but it's coming. And, there's this bizarre order. Okay, so that's all the clues that we have in chapter 7 before we get to the 12. Now what we want to do is go to the end of the chapter and see what's the conclusion. How does the chapter end after it lists all 12? Remember I said there's an introduction and a conclusion often when you have these types of chapters. Sometimes that introduction and conclusion is only 1 sentence. There's this one genealogy in Genesis that just goes on and on and on. And it doesn't offer anything except this guy was this old, and this guy was this old, and this guy was this old, except you get to Enoch. And what does it say about Enoch? Chanoch? he walked with God. And if you are reading that and you get to that verse and you're trying to figure out, how could I give a sermon on this? And then you come up with, there's this guy Enoch who walked with God. And you say, oh, thank God Enoch walked with God because I got nothing. How am I going to, I have an hour to fill. And how am I going to teach a class on this guy's this old and this guy's that old? So then you go to the Midrash, and then you go to Rashi, and then you and you wonder how we walked with God, and then you figure out there's a lot here. Okay, so that's what we're doing now. So now we go to verse 84, and we don't just have 4 words, Enoch walked with God. We have 5 verses, 6 verses, 84 to 89, a little more help. So, Scott, would you mind from verse 84?
This was the dedication offering for the altar for the chieftains of Israel upon its being anointed. Silver bowls, 12. Silver basins, 12. Gold ladles, 12. Silver per bowl, 130. Per basin, 70. Total silver vessels, 2,400 sanctuary shekels. The 12 gold ladles filled with incense, 10 sanctuary shekels per ladle. Total gold of the ladles, 120. Total of herd animals for burnt offerings, 12 bulls. Of rams, 12. Of yearling lambs, 12, with their proper meal offering. Of goats for sin offering, 12. Total of herd animals for sacrifices of well-being, 24 bulls. Of rams, 60. Of he-goats, 60. Of yearling lambs, 60. That was the dedication offering for the altar after its anointing.
Okay. Did you pick up anything there? Okay, all 12, right? 1 for each tribe, which means nobody stands out, right? Nobody stands out. There's no tribe any different than any other. When they came to do the offerings, they had 12 offerings. So everyone had their day. Well, so let me ask you this. Why do you think they brought, if they were going to do it this way, if they were going to offer all 12 on the same day, why not have all of the princes just bring their 12 on the same day? Why take a different day for each tribe? Like today in the municipality of Sinai, Moses declares today is officially Naphtali Day in the town of Sinai City. Whatever. We do that sometimes, proclamation. Whereas you are annoying. Whereas, whatever. I don't know, whatever. Why give each tribe a day if you're going to offer them all on the same day? And the whole point is to do 12 at once.
I basically think it's because God wants to see all of us in the same way, the same, I guess, divinity.
Okay.
It starts out saying that God wants them each to have.
Oh, sorry. Here, can you?
Starts out saying that God wants to have each of them have their moment of glory, give their moment of recognition.
Yes.
And this was the way to do it. If you brought everyone together, it would really diminish the accolades to give any one group. So this way, they each had their moment in the sun.
Very good. Very good. They each have their moment of the sun, but then it's quickly reeled in because tomorrow's somebody else. Very good. Judy, is that what you're going to say? Okay. Is there another? Jeff?
So this took place rather not too far after the 2 sons, Moses' nephews
Nadav and Avihu?
were killed.
Uh-huh. Very good.
And so I guess besides equality, Moses wanted to make sure that bringing the offerings before God, this thing, it didn't happen again, and there had to be a system that everybody had to follow.
So that it was done in the right. Very nice. Very nice. So a contrast to when someone went out on their own and messed everything up. Okay, very nice. Very nice. Scott, would you mind reading one more time verse 89, the last verse?
When Moses went to the tent of meeting to speak with him, he would hear the voice addressing him from above the cover that was on top of the ark of the pact, between the two cherubim. Thus he spoke to him.
Okay, so Rashi has an incredible comment here. Now, before we get to Rashi's comment, which is spectacular, you know how God sounded when he was at Mount Sinai, because the Torah explains it, that it was so loud and so powerful that the Jews said to Moses, "You hear it and tell us the rest of it," right? Remember that? It was so loud and thunderous. So Moses speaks to God all the time. We just had a case where Moses spoke to God. What was the conversation? Moses said, "How do I know who goes first? Do I do it by tribe? Do I do it by how they're marching?" And then he gets the answer. So presumably God told him the answer. The answer is, do it by how they march, one at a time. Moses says, "You got it." That was the conversation. When we imagine those conversations, we don't imagine that God's voice sounded, like it sounded at Mount Sinai. We imagine that Moses and God probably had a different rapport, right? You know, that Moses would go into the tent and God would say something. But you don't think it was probably as loud as the voice that God spoke to the whole nation at Mount Sinai with the thunder and the lightning. You know what it looks like. If you saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know what it looked like. You remember that scene? Right? They opened the ark. He said, "Marion, don't look at it." No? You don't? Okay. Okay, good. Listen, to be a true Torah scholar, you have to have a pretty good handle on Raiders of the Ark Part 1. I mean, if you really, because that's the closest images we have to what actually happened. Part 4 is coming out, end of June. But I'll tell, no, part 5. Part 5. I'll tell you this. In my opinion, you can take it or leave it. But 1 and 3 were spectacular, and 2 and 4 were not so good. So now that this is an odd one, number 5, I'm more excited.
Which was 3? Which was 2?
3 is when I went to Petra. 2 was Temple of Doom with the kid. I don't know, I thought it was stupid. And 4 I couldn't even watch. 4 was horrible. That stupid skull, whatever. But 5 looks fun.
He's 80 years old.
It's debuting in the Hub. Harrison Ford's going to be here. Yeah.
Maybe they'll stick around for Torah Study.
Yeah. He's 1/8 Jewish. Not too shabby, according to Adam Sandler. All right, back to this. You know, that's Harrison Ford, a quarter Jewish, not too shabby. All right. Look what Rashi says about God's voice this time when he speaks to Moses. This is an incredible comment. Stuart, do you have a mic? Scott, would you mind passing the mic? Would you mind reading the last Rashi on the front page? And he heard the voice. This is an unbelievable comment.
And he heard the voice. One might think it was a very low voice. Scripture, however, states that the voice, with the definitive article, the well-known voice, it was that thunderous voice with which he spoke to him on Sinai.
Yeah. So if you look at the Hebrew in verse 49, Vayavo Moshe el Moed, Moses came to the tent of meeting, Lidaber, he told to talk to him. Vayishman, he heard, not et kol, et hakol, the voice. Now, who else's voice could it be? Of course it's God's. If you go into the tent of meeting, that's the only person that can go in there to speak to you is God. Not the only person, but the only entity that could speak to you is God. So you don't need the ha. The ha is grammatically incorrect there. It shouldn't be there. But the fact that ha, which means the definitive article is there, Rashi says it's telling us it's that same hakol that you heard at Mount Sinai. Now, that voice that we heard at Mount Sinai, that hakol, you only hear on a very specific occasion. That specific occasion that we know so far is Mount Sinai. But what happened at Mount Sinai? The people were united. The people were united. And so, because of the way all of the 12 oxen were offered together, the tribes were not separated into 12 different tribes. They were united into one Jewish people. I mean, they weren't called the Jews yet, but you know what I mean. They were one nation under God, indivisible. Right? I'll be here all week. Yeah, for all. Okay. So that's pretty cool. Something happened that God was so impressed with how this worked out that he was able to take 12 tribes who are each jockeying for their own place in society. And for the moment, for this moment, by the way, it's a very important moment. This is the creation of the tabernacle. By the way, this is why you could argue. I heard this in a lecture this week, that the tabernacle in the wilderness was holier than the holy temple in Jerusalem. Why? Because it was a place where Moses spoke to God directly. And once they got to the holy temple, Moses wasn't there. Moses never entered into the land of Israel, never saw the holy temple, and there was no one else besides Moses who was ever able to talk to God directly, which means that God's voice never appeared in the holy temple directly. It only appeared in the Mishkan directly in the Sinai, which is it's an interesting idea. Okay, so now that we've figured out that the goal of all of this, and this isn't the most profound message you've ever heard, but it's an interesting idea to say this chapter looks really boring, but the whole reason that it was constructed this way, the longest chapter in the Torah, I think, 89 verses, is to make the point that though we are different tribes, we're all one nation. Now, as Jews today, when we look at, the Jews who don't even recognize each other as Jews, and you're not Jewish, and you're too Jewish, and you see how important this is to remember that we're all Jews. Okay, now that being said, where did the differences emerge? Where did the nature and the future of each tribe first emerge? Where did it come from, though? What was the beginning of it? How did Jacob's life end?
He blessed them.
Jacob blessed all of the tribes. Now, at that point, they weren't tribes, they were 12 kids. I mean, they were older, they were adults, but they were Jacob's sons. And he said, you, Judah, you got politics in your future. Yisachar, they'd eat you for breakfast in the Knesset. So you just study Torah. Dan, you're going to law school. Right? And this is what happened. So if you would read through, and if you could skip there now to Genesis 49, verse 28. Well, yeah, okay. Genesis 49. We have a page? 314.
49, what verse?
26. So I don't want to read through all of the blessings, but trust me, chapter 49 is individual blessings for each of the tribe, and they each get what their blessing is going to be. Now listen, I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, Don, you seem to be interested in the law. By the way, Don means judgment. And Don, their tribe, became the judges. So, okay, so because Don liked law, his entire tribe for all of history has to be judges? But that's what happened. And because Issachar studied Torah, because Zevulun was a hunter, you people have to be the hunters forever. And that's what happened. Okay, so it's just the way it worked out. But look what the Torah says in verse 26. Anyone have it? Judy, would you mind reading verse 26?
49:26. Blessings of your father surpass my parents' blessings. The bounty of the timeless hills, let them be on Joseph's head, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. Benjamin is a wolf that rends in the morning, devouring the booty, in the evening dividing the spoil. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and thus did their father speak to them as he blessed them, blessing each one with a blessing that befit him. And he gave them a charge, saying, when I am gathered to my people, bury me with my ancestors in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite.
Okay, good enough. So if we look at verse 28 closely, and I brought Rashi on the back of the page. So if you look on the back of the sheet, Rashi on 49:28. I just want to parse out the Hebrew a little bit before we look at Rashi. Kol ele, look closely. There's a very powerful word here. Now, how do we usually refer to the sons of Jacob? What's Jacob's other name? Israel. How do you say sons of? B'nai. So how would you say the children of Israel? B'nai Israel. And very good Hebrew. Usually when we refer to the Jewish people or the tribes, we say B'nai Israel. Now, the word for tribe in Hebrew is shevet. You ever heard that word before? Shevet. No, shevet is to sit. Shevet is a tribe. Okay, so if you look now, the way that the Hebrew is constructed in verse 28 says, Kol ele, all of these, not B'nai Yisrael, Shivtei Yisrael. So the plural of Shevet is Shivtei. Shivtei Yisrael. Okay? Shnaim Asar. There's 12 of them. Okay? You are all tribes of the same people. Okay? The Torah is going out of its way to say that you're all tribes of the same nation of Israel immediately after listing the individual characteristic of each tribe. And so what I'm trying to show you is there is a mirror between chapter 49 of Genesis and chapter 7 of Numbers that we just looked at. Did everyone see that? Yeah. And this mirror reflects that each tribe is uniquely special, but if you let that get carried away, you're going to break up into 12 nations and forget that you're one nation who all has incumbent upon them the same mitzvahs. That's what's different. That's what's different about us. We're the same mitzvahs. Okay, clear so far? Okay.
Can I ask you something? The fact that he blessed each tribe and he gave uniqueness to each of them, would that also be meant that they would need each other to survive?
Okay, that's where I'm going. Exactly. Very, very good. All right. Thanks for stealing my thunder. All right, no, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Bobby,
You know, there's a,
can you grab that mic? By the way, for those, well, at home they don't even need to hear that. We'll get to it.
there's a close analogy between how God and Moses formed the people to how this country was formed. The first attempt was a confederation, and everybody wanted to be independent and a sovereign political state. It wasn't until they formed the Constitution in 1789 that each of the states became
100%.
part of the whole.
There are a lot of similarities. I mean, not similarities, but there's a lot you can compare, and it's very interesting. Very interesting.
It tracks the birth of this country.
Yeah. So let me just share this last Rashi, and then we'll wrap up with Erica's point, which is really the whole ball game. Rashi says here he blessed them, and the point that Erica just made, which I'll repeat for those at home in a second, is indicated through a grammatical error in the Hebrew. Now, there are no grammatical errors in the Hebrew, which means to say what appears to be a grammatical error is not an error, it's a lesson that's meant to teach us something. But there's something wrong with the Hebrew. So if you look in if you look at the Rashi, he explains it. So it says he blessed them. This is on the back of the sheet. It should have said, every man according to his blessing, he blessed him. Right? So what Rashi said, it should have said here would have been the correct grammatical way to express it. According to his blessing, he blessed him. Why then does it say he blessed them? Right? So if I would have told you, according to his blessing, he blessed them, it makes no sense. But that's what the Torah says. But since in the blessing he ascribed to Judah personally the strength of a lion, have you ever noticed that Judah, that the emblem of the city of Jerusalem is a lion? That's because that was the sign of Judah. And Judah's possession was Jerusalem, because they were the kings. Okay? To Benjamin, the rapacity of a wolf, and to Naphtali, the swiftness of a hind. One might think he did not include all of them in all of the blessings. Scripture therefore states he blessed them, should be a capital H there, i.e., each of them personally and all of them together, extending all the personal blessings to each of them. So if I would say to you, to Norman I give the blessing of scholarship, to Edith I give the blessing of queenship, to Erica I give the blessing of judgment. I've just given all of you judgment. I've just given all of you kingship, queenship. I've just given all of you, what did I give you? Scholarship. How so? Because they cover it for everybody. One tribe were the warriors, but they might have thought, we're the warriors, we protect, we're God, we're the tribe of God, we protect the tribe of God. So Jacob said, no. Oh, that's why I said bless them with the lower H. I was not talking about God, I was talking about Jacob. When Jacob said, you're the warriors, he wasn't saying protect your tribe, he was saying protect everybody. When he was telling Don, you're going to be the judges, you can't just judge your tribe. You've got to send judges to every region. So if we each have the offerings of all of the tribes, then we each have everything. And it is the job of every tribe to offer everything to everyone. So, to me that's profound. And to me, that is what was meant to hold the Jewish people together. And what did God say? When you hold each other together like this and you're united, you get my actual real voice. That's an amazing. So, how do we know when we're communicating with God? When we're united as Jews. And instead of us right now as a Jewish nation, instead of the Orthodox saying, not all the Orthodox, I mean, that's an absurd statement, but some of them. All you Reformed Jews care about is social action. And we say, All you know, Orthodox Jews, certain, I don't mean all of them, but you know what I mean. All you care about is studying sections of the Talmud that have no bearing on anything anymore. You can sit there and study all day what happens when your ox goes into my backyard, but the truth is, none of us even own an ox. Right? I spent months studying the laws of oxen, only to at one point say, I don't even have an ox. I mean, how much more of this do I... So, why don't they say, you guys like the mitzvah of social action? Great, go do it. And we'll take credit. And in exchange, I'll know what happens when my ox kills your third cousin's neighbor. And if that ever happens to you, you call me and I'll tell you what to do. I mean, whatever. Or whatever. My matzah's more kosher. But why can't we appreciate each other's contributions and have whatever contribution is being done on behalf of all of the Jewish people? Not only do we not appreciate it, but what I think the Torah is telling us here is that's how it was supposed to be. Different Jews are drawn to different mitzvot. Different Jews prioritize different ideas. Why can't we do them on behalf of the whole nation? Because if we do, if I'm able to see other Jews doing those mitzvahs on behalf of me and vice versa, the result of that is then we're united, and then God's voice is heard, and then the Jewish people are marching in the way that we're supposed to. So this is a very boring chapter, but I think this point that it makes is worthwhile and very profound. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
But just for the guys here. So I found another reference by the Orach Chaim, and he said the midrash. Here.
Amen.